Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning to those of you connecting from morning time zones. Myself, Venkat Kuncham, Charter Member of TiE Mysuru and your host for the event. On behalf of TiE Mysuru and our board, I welcome everyone to Day 2 of TiECon 2021, the biggest conference for entrepreneurs from Mysuru. Yesterday's speakers highlighted their Mysuru origin by sharing their life stories and experiences. We continue today by bringing you a special keynote address and a lineup of speakers to share their learnings and experiences. Before we begin, let's start with a welcome address by Mysuru chapter's board member and vice president, Mr. Sudanva. Over to you, Mr. Sudanva.
Thank you, Venkat. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you from wherever you've joined. Today's event, Day 2 of TiECon Mysuru, hosted by TiE Mysuru. I'm happy to, it's my proud privilege to welcome you all to this event and the interesting sessions that are coming up. I particularly want to call out Mr. Srikanth Nadamuni, Varchasvi Shankar, who's joined in from Michigan, Sandeep Rao, again joined in from the US, Rohan Ganapati, Srivatsa Srinivasa Rao, and then Raj Patil, who's going to do the next panel discussion, along with Venkat Raman Balasubramanian. Thank you for accepting to be on the speaker note, or keynote speaker, or panel discussion today. I also want to welcome all the moderators, Kiran Ranga, Vikram Muthanna, Dr. Mahesh Rao, to the Day 2 of TiECon Mysuru. Looking forward to exciting sessions, the high spirits from yesterday's event. And thank you very much for everybody who's joined in today's event. I know there are lots of friends of TiE Mysuru from other TiE chapters also who joined in today. Welcome to all of you. Over to Venkat to get the sessions started. Venkat?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sudanva, for that welcome address. Let's start today's sessions with a keynote address titled Entrepreneurial Journey from Startup to Scale Up by Mr. Srikanth Nadamuni, co-founder and chairman of NovaPay Solutions Private Limited. For this session, I would like to welcome Mr. Sheshadri Puttaraju, member of TiE Mysuru, to do the introduction. Over to Sheshadri.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's a great privilege. Yeah, Srikanth Nadamuni is an entrepreneur and technologist with roots in Mysore, who has touched the lives of more than 1 billion Indians for the better. He was the technology brain behind what was arguably one of the biggest change management exercises in governance that the country has seen in Aadhaar, championed by the Unique Identification Authority of India. Srikanth has a strong connect with the Silicon Valley and saddles India and the US in his entrepreneurial and technology journey. As a technologist, he was one of the core members who worked on UltraSpark, the most successful and highly loved CPU from Sun Microsystems. As an entrepreneur, he co-founded Khosla Labs, a startup incubator, along with the legendary Vinod Khosla. He is the co-founder and chairman at NovaPay Solutions and Verified Digital, and he is on the board at HDFC Bank. Srikanth is the managing trustee of the e-Government's Fund Foundation that he co-founded with Nandan Nilekani in 2003. eGov focuses on municipal governances and works in over 4,000 cities across the country. Previously, he spent 15 years as a technologist in Silicon Valley, California, developing CPUs at Sun Microsystems and Intel Corp, interactive TV systems at Silicon Graphics, and healthcare internet startups at WebMD. His Mysore connects is the Srikanth completed his electronics and communication engineering from NIE, University of Mysore. He was inspired by his grandfather's entrepreneurial zeal, who, despite having just 10th grade education, traveled globally imported new equipments and technology, and set up several companies in wood and plastic in Mysore. Did you know TiECon Nadamuni was the founding head of technology of the Aadhaar project, where he helped design and implement the system from UID Technology Center in Bangalore. His passion is cycling. He loves cycling. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheshadri, for that very generous introduction. I've given many talks in many countries, but I've never spoken to folks in Mysore, and I have many friends there. As you will see, I was born in Mysore in Jalumba Hospital, which we all know. And in fact, I went to CFTRI school all the way from kindergarten to 10th grade. So you see my group mates over there. Some of them are watching this keynote today with interest. And went to college in Mahajanas College, 11th and 12th. And after that, joined NIE, the National Institute of Engineering, to do my bachelor's in electronics and communication. It was a short stint at a company called First Byte. I spent about 8 months to a year, where the Shyam Sundar theater was, I guess. And then I went on to the United States to do my master's in electrical and computer engineering at LSU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So this was basically, I was largely up to 22. I grew up in Mysore and then moved to the US to study. And right after I finished my master's, we got into a rickety car and drove to Silicon Valley. This was 1988, 86 to 88 was my master's. And no job, with a degree in hand and maybe a few $100s, set out and reached the Silicon Valley barely with the car that we had. And within 30 days, I was working at this company, Sun Microsystems, which was pioneering the Unix workstations of that time and growing incredibly rapidly, one of the fastest growing at that point in time. To cut a long story short, I spent about 4 to 5 years at Sun, largely in chip design. I was designing CPUs. In fact, the Spark CPU that Sheshadri talked about, which powered, internally it was called Spitfire. It powered the high-end Sun workstations. And I worked on CAD and CAE tools for chip design. This is a largely algorithmic, fairly detailed kind of job. For instance, I worked on resistive, capacitive extraction and so on. Very compute intensive job to create a chip that's like 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters with a ton of transistors, 5 million transistors those days. Of course, these days they stuff in 5 billion. But the one thing that I learned this in my very first job was when you work with a team of 300 people, chip designers, really smart people, you sort of really work, you very quickly learn about how you break up jobs. You have clean interfaces because there's a large number of people that have to come together to get these 5 million transistors to work. And if you don't, if the chip doesn't work, you lose $1 billion. So designing for test was very important. And I brought some of those methodologies to software. So moving on, I joined Intel next, which had its own architecture, not a RISC architecture. And in fact, built, I worked on placement tools. Packing the chip is incredibly important to get speeds. So I worked on this simulated annealing algorithm. Today, AI, ML is very popular, very important too. And this is, this simulated annealing again is a very similar kind of AI kind of approach using gradient descent to pack the chip. So in fact, P6 and P7 had my tools actually packing that chip to as smaller area as possible to make it faster and faster. The one thing I recollect, of course, I was working at the Robert Noyce building you see in the picture, which is the headquarters of Intel in Santa Clara in California. And the one interesting thing is, while you walked around the corridors, you heard Kannada, you heard Hindi, you heard Hebrew, you heard Chinese, you heard Telugu, you heard Tamil, all of these languages. Of course, there was English, but our lingua franca was the whiteboard. We would people would grab a marker and drop their ideas very fast, but we all came together. That melting pot really was something that I experienced at Intel, which was so stark, with so many different kinds of people working there. Moving on, in fact, between Intel and Silicon Graphics, both me and my wife, who I'd met at Sun Microsystems, we quit our jobs and we were traveling for 6 months, which was an awesome time all around the world, including India. We came back and I joined Silicon Graphics, where she was earlier working. This was an incredible project on interactive TV, which is video on demand. We take video on demand for granted these days on YouTube and so on. Those days, it was very hard to do that. So we were pioneers in putting together fiber networks and deploying video on demand for Time Warner in Florida. And I was actually not only developing systems there, but I was also going over to Florida to deploy it in the TV networks. So I got a sense of the media industry and how this large media company, Time Warner, worked, and how our digital solution, way early, ahead of its time, was deployed in that context. So the learning over there was actually more to do with how do you manage incredibly large clients who are very demanding, and you have a service that has to work in real time. And those days, the kind of compute that we have today didn't exist. In fact, we put one of the workstation boxes initially as a set-top box to get the kind of speeds we needed. So these were early days of video on demand, and a lot of learnings on how to get those kind of rates going. The next jump was quite interesting. Silicon Graphics founder Jim Clark started Netscape. And of course, you all probably know the story of Netscape. It went public and he became a billionaire in 45 minutes of trading. His next company was Healthion WebMD. I was employee number 6. This was an incredibly interesting space, $1 trillion industry. And Jim Clark had come to us and put a small little whiteboard on University Avenue. That's the building on University Avenue, very close to Stanford, where he said, connect the doctors and the hospitals and the labs and the various stakeholders in the healthcare industry with a browser and a backend system to serve them all, so that patients don't have to keep re-entering the same data all over the place over and over again. And it's well documented in the book, Michael Lewis's book, The New Thing. And so we started building that. And the interesting thing is, we had $25 million term sheet that was signed on day one when Jim Clark and Kleiner Perkins came together. And we had the Netscape founder as the founder of our company. And we had customers coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, you guys are going to be successful. You guys, you will be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But 2 years later, we didn't have a product. We didn't have a strategy. So one of the great learnings of Healthion WebMD was that it doesn't matter if you have Elon Musk as your founder and all the money that you need to build a company. If you don't think hard enough into the real problem that you're solving, and you don't have product market fit, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't work. Of course, we learned quickly on the job. We turned it around, and it got deployed in many, many places. I was a director of engineering. I was the youngest director of engineering at that time at WebMD. And we had a lot of folks from Stanford across the street. I learned a lot on the internet technologies. Browser, of course, was brand new. JavaScript was invented by Brendan Eich. Brendan would come over. He was at Netscape, worked closely with Brendan on trying to debug the browser, which would crash all the time. So a lot of learnings on the initial days of internet, technologies. And also, one of the things I learned really well was from an excellent project manager named Greg something, I forget his last name now, but his project management sort of methodology is something that I learned quite young, and I'll come back to it during the Aadhaar days. If not for that, sort of detailed understanding of how to get projects done, complex, large projects done, we wouldn't have, executed things on time. I also did mergers and acquisitions for WebMD after the engineering stint. And of course, we IPO'd in 1999, and WebMD is doing okay. It's still alive and kicking. So that was sort of my first startup. And then the second startup, I started my own company, Globe Trades Inc., which failed miserably. And I want to talk about this because a lot of entrepreneurs look at failure as some sort of a, thing that, not to talk about. It's something that you don't advertise, you sort of shove it under the rug. But importantly, I would say, failure teaches you a lot more than success does, right? You spend a lot of time to try to solve these problems, and still things don't work. And out of that comes pearls of wisdom of, what not to do many times. And of course, this was the year the internet bubble and crash, and everything was crashing all around me. So this company didn't do well either, but I wouldn't give up, right? I kept trying to, get this company to, get some traction, even while the internet was crashing and everything was crashing, the stock markets had crashed, and so on, till a point where my investors came and told me, Srikanth, there is no way you can turn this around at this point. It's okay. I'd raised $1 million. They said, it's completely all right, move on. So that's another learning. Sometimes you need to be smart and give up, right? So that you can start on your next idea, so that you can, live to fight another battle, right? So that was a great learning for me at Globe Trades Inc. Around that time, me and my wife, we decided to move back to India. My son was 6, my daughter was 2, whoops. And so that's the dotted line that shows all the companies and things that I did in California. The green dot has gone off into the sea, but it should be in San Francisco. Around that area, the Bay Area is where I was at. Now we come to the India chapter. My wife and I decided, largely because of her drive to do something for the country, we said, well, let's go back to India and work on projects. We were already, working with a group called the Indians for Collective Action. We were funding many NGOs and work in India. And so we came back to say, let's try and do something instead of just sending money to India. That was the goal. So I came back in, the family moved in 2002. And in 2003, Nandan Nilekani and I started the e-Governments Foundation. So to me, the private sector was doing brilliantly, Infosys and, Tata's, Wipros and so on. All of them, the software industry was doing well, and so were other segments as well. Whereas everywhere I saw, for instance, the government, the cities were not doing well. The municipality that was running the city, potholes and so on and so forth that we all know about. So I said, I'm going to work on this municipal problem. And I met up with Nandan. A lot of people think I was at Infosys and I knew Nandan much earlier. I did not. I met up, we have a common friend in California, and I connected with Nandan, and we decided to start this foundation to solve the problems of our municipalities through a ERP software platform. Okay. And now, to cut a long story short, we have about 24 products that run in many, many, many cities across India, whether it is, citizen-centric, or it's, on the expenditure side or the revenue side or the administration side. We have an ERP that runs. And in fact, if you have gotten a vaccination in India and you downloaded a QR, your digitally encoded certificate with a QR code on it, that comes from eGov. The DIVOC certificate was developed in eGov, and now about 12 countries are using it. I've also started a 10-bed ICU project to deploy ICUs in rural hospitals through this NGO. So this is something that Nandan and I run. I'm the managing trustee of this foundation, and we're very proud of the work that we do here in India. So some of the learnings here for entrepreneurs, since we're going to talk about scale today, is, working with people is much harder than working with computers. When I was dealing with algorithms and I had even tough problems, mathematically hard problems, NP-complete problems, we had ways of dealing with it because the computer works in, sort of predictable ways. People don't. Running a city is complex. Working with the government is not easy. So that's the first learning. I had no experience working with government, but it was an incredibly good learning to see how do we work with people, government, administration, society to make change. And if I had not done this project, the e-governance foundation, and we run it to this day, I don't think Aadhaar would have been possible, at least for me, because technology alone does not solve societal issues. Technology, the trite saying goes, is a good tool, sometimes misused tool, right? Sometimes a hammer looking for a nail, but if designed well with business process reengineering, and if you can carry the people with you, you can see quantum leaps in efficiency and gains, right? So we will see some of that. But on the positive side, the government brings scale. Private sector, well, if you're Google, you bring scale, but many companies don't work at the scale of the government, right? Government of India, we deal with 1 billion people, 1.3 billion people. So anything you work with the government has to scale enormously. And that's another thing I learned. The IAS officers I worked with, they were brilliant at handling scale, right? They're not technologists. It's not only technologists who understand scale. Our IAS officers understand scale really well, right? So that is something I learned from Indian bureaucrats, officers who had worked in the districts, who had worked on tough problems. Of course, the other thing is, you figure out very soon when you're dealing with such large scale, though I can't go into the details of the standards, if you work rigorously on standards and take a platform approach on your tools, you can truly transform cities, transform societies, right? And I had already seen this with the e-Governance Foundation. We had launched it in 57 cities in Karnataka, and then went on to launching it in Delhi, and now we are in Punjab, and whatever, Andhra Pradesh, many places, Jharkhand, and so on and so forth. 4,000 cities we impact with this work. Okay, so I left the most time for this particular project because I wanted to take you through some details here. Often people are very curious about the Aadhaar. How do you build a national ID system for 1 billion people? I'll start off with the technology piece because a lot of people wonder what kind of technology goes into it. It's a very horizontally scalable technology, not just relying on relational databases, because we had to do 8,000 trillion biometric matches every day. When you have 1 billion people in your database and a new guy comes to enroll, and I have to match all your 10 fingerprints and your 2 irises and your photo of your face with 1 billion people, that cross product is 1,000 trillion times 12. Okay, it's a very large amount of compute, right? And how do you build that? That was the problem we had. So we had to build a horizontally scalable technology. Okay, you can read the CAP theorem if you want to understand what are the limits of this kind of high compute throughput that has to go through in a distributed network, right? The vertically scalable systems like RDBMS won't scale. So we had to use NoSQL, MongoDB, Solar indexing, and so on from a persistent store perspective. Commodity hardware. I knew my hardware quite well. Completely open source based, open APIs, super important, right? Of course, Hadoop, the paper had just come out at Google and Yahoo had implemented it. It was a beta release. We already started using Hadoop, the distributed compute system, for various applications. So we also realized it's an ecosystem play. We can't do everything ourselves. So we had to get registrars, the states and banks, enrolling agencies, operators, and so on for the enrolling ecosystem. Similarly, on the authentication side, we had AUA, KUAs, and so on. We had to break things apart so that the whole ecosystem came together to deliver Aadhaar, which is why it worked. If we had said we're going to run the whole show, it would not have worked. India is too large, too diverse, too complex, 16 languages, so rich and poor, urban, rural, too difficult, right? So the ecosystem is really what saved us. Standards, everything you see over there in yellow, were all standards we developed. India became the center of the biometric ID universe. We came up with the device standards in the front end so that lots of devices could come in and be sold to India from international players, right? The cost came down. The device costs plummeted because of that, both for enrollment and authentication. Vendors quadrupled. Our multi-biometric vendors, it was 20 rupees per dedupe was what the price was. We ended up paying 2 because it was so competitive because of our scale, right? So when you come up with good standards, you unlock value in different parts of the supply chain, right? So whether it's biometrics, devices, and so on, and the sort of usage, of course, skyrocketed because all parts were interchangeable. We didn't have vendor lock-in in any part, right? And that's the reason why it scales to this day. A little bit about planning. I talked to you about my learning at Healthion WebMD. Within 20 days, this was my initial plan for Aadhaar. It was printed at home. It was pasted using sellotape. And I presented this saying, we have to build it ourselves. And this was the day the first Aadhaar will be given out. And it can't be outsourced through an RFP. We had to build it ourselves. We had to put the best team in the world in place. This came within 20 days, okay? So you can put an initial project plan that will give you 80–90% accuracy upfront very quickly. Of course, you need a high-level project plan so that some important things like budgets and monies and cabinet approvals and so on get taken, but you can't do without a detailed plan. So Nandan asked me to put together a detailed project plan for the entire project. So 5,000 plus work items, whether it was Delhi or the UID Technology Center I built at Bangalore. A little bit on the technology center. It was not some grand big thing. We had humble beginnings. A team of 5 to 6, what I call TDU, the Technology Development Unit, was set up. Okay, Pramod Verma, Chief Architect, Sanjay Jain, Product Manager, Raj Mashruwala from Silicon Valley, who was co-founder of TIPCO on the biometrics, Vivek Raghavan, who took over biometrics later on, Jagdish Babu on devices from Intel. This was the initial team, and I rented an apartment outside my home. Okay, and this team sat 6 months and designed the project. Right, we used to eat at my place every night. It was 7 by 24. Right, so this was a garage startup. This is what gave us the good design. Later, we could outsource and get some, people to implement the project, but the design had to be done very, very carefully. I can't go too much into the details, but I would tell you that it was the best team we could assemble, on the planet, right? And these guys have come from around the world to work on this project with a missionary zeal. This is a little bit on my enrollment projection, the projections I had done to figure out, depending on how much hardware I got, how fast can we finish the Aadhaar project? How fast can we enroll 1 billion people, right? So we were doing what ifs to accurately tell the government what's going to happen with this project, as opposed to come every day and figure out what happens, right? The other very important learning was dashboarding. Network Operations Center was set up. In fact, I had like a amphitheater with a large screen with real-time inputs on exactly where every packet from Aadhaar was going on. And this really, really helped our project. And so if you quickly sum up on the learnings of Aadhaar, it was a garage startup. Very few people realize this. They somehow think, oh, we had whatever, large team, billions of people, whatever, large offices and so on. No, that came much later, right? Initially, the small team worked for 4 to 6 months, I think, on just designing and documenting exactly what the design was. Everything from authentication, yes, no, to how KYC will be done and so on. They're all whiteboarded in a little room with 2 tables, in 2 dining tables. And so that's really how it was done. It was very much like a garage startup. So you need, it's not the number of people. You need incredibly smart people. So one thing you as entrepreneurs should try to attract is surround yourself with smart people. Don't worry about have they been to the best Ivy League college or do they have the best experience. If they have raw intelligence, often they figure out how to solve problems, right? So in fact, Vivek Raghavan knew nothing about biometrics. I made him the head of biometrics because he was so brilliant. He was off the charts brilliant, right? So that's what you really need. Detailed design, like I told you, you cannot, if you don't do a good design, it doesn't matter how you implement it. You're going to end up with band-aids and it's not going to scale, right? So good design is absolutely important when you do products in your startups. Platforms more important than products, right? We did not build it for healthcare or for voting or for whatever. We built a platform. We said this is an innovation platform, identity platform on which every government department or whichever government department needed it could use it, right? Layered and open APIs for online access. And of course, this ushered in the India stack, whether it was e-sign based on digital signatures, but using your biometric, or DigiLocker where you can put all your IDs. Okay, I put my vaccine certificate into my DigiLocker and my various things. UPI, the universal payment interface. These are all layered technologies. That's doing 5 billion transactions, $120 billion last month alone, 5 billion transactions. Account aggregator, now the open lending framework. These are all layered technologies on Aadhaar. So one Mysore connection, I would do a lot of pilots in Mysore because I'm from Mysore. And Aadhaar's first pilot was the LPG gas cylinder pilot, so that it deduplicated and you could take only one gas cylinder. When we implemented that, it saved us 7,000 crores in the first year in India. Okay, the entire cost of Aadhaar is less than 7,000 crores. The first project implemented Aadhaar, in the first year, the ROI was, return on investment was massive. It just recouped the entire cost of the project in just the first year, the first project. Of course, I'll just end with saying after that, I partnered with Vinod Khosla and started Khosla Labs and basically started some companies on fintech and looked at BFSI and banking. But I'll stop here. That's a story for another talk. I'll stop here, and if there are questions, we can take some questions right now. Thank you very much.
That's amazing, Mr. Srikanth. I just have a very quick question, actually.
Sure.
So, since the launch of Aadhaar, technology has changed tremendously. How do you see it's going to shape up from here?
Yeah, very, very good question. In fact, last week I moderated a session at Aadhaar Workshop 2.0. I was asked to talk to a bunch of experts how to improve Aadhaar. So one is biometrics with AI. Deep learning is making huge changes with biometrics. The face match algorithms are extremely accurate right now for fingerprint as well as for face. Iris, it's about the same. Liveness detection. People would commit frauds by putting dummy fingers and so on. Now we can detect 14 different kinds of spoofs very accurately, right? So that's one big area, deep learning. The second is, we're looking at, privacy. The Supreme Court Justice talked at that session talking about data privacy. There's many ways. There is a self-sovereign identity idea on blockchain that can be implemented, where you can download your identity on your phone and do your authentication directly on your phone as opposed to hitting the server. And it is provable that the server and your device have the same data, that you cannot tamper with the data that's on your device. So that is self-sovereign identity. There are multiple methods by which we can improve privacy now. Zero knowledge proof methods have come up and so on. So we're looking at blockchain. Can blockchain with Aadhaar make a central bank digital currency better that RBI is looking at and so on? So the many innovations we're looking at to improve Aadhaar 10 years after it was launched.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Srikanth, in sharing your roots from Mysuru, your work on chip designs, contributing so much to the society by your work on Aadhaar and e-government foundation, and your journey sharing from entrepreneur, from startup to scale up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So attendees, during the sessions, to post your questions, you may find the Q&A box located in the top right corner of your presentation window. Feel free to post your questions there. Okay, so next we have an exciting fireside chat with Mr. Varchasvi Shankar, CEO of V2Soft USA. This session is moderated by TiE Mysuru charter member Kiran Ranga. Over to you, Kiran.
Thank you, Venkat. That was certainly fascinating. Keynote address by Mr. Srikanth on the emergence of microchip technologies, digital scaling, and the challenges that he faced in Silicon Valley. It was also very interesting to hear about the Aadhaar project. Thank you for that. Well, it's my pleasure to embark on a fireside chat with Varchasvi Shankar. If I had to pick a topic for the fireside chat, it would be cocktails and dreams. I don't know how many of you have seen the 90s movie starring Tom Cruise. Well, Varchasvi, I can confidently say, did one better than Tom Cruise because he launched his own brand of bourbon. Yeah, you heard it right. How cool is that? So Varchasvi has launched 2 whiskeys called Varchas Bourbon Whiskey and Varchas Rye Whiskey. Well, that's the cocktail bit. But his dreams are much, much bigger. Varchasvi is a visionary entrepreneur who has built V2Soft as a global conglomerate in IT services and consulting with around offices in around 6 countries. V2Soft is a group of companies that have created over 2,500 jobs in Michigan and over 5,000 jobs worldwide, including jobs here in Mysuru. Virtuously has received numerous accolades and awards, including Fast 50 Asian American Business Award, Inc. 5000 Fastest Growing Companies in the US, Michigan Top 50 Companies to Watch For, and NMSDC Regional Supplier of the Year Award. V2Soft was incorporated back in 98 and has its roots in the automotive industry. Over time, V2Soft has built competencies in emerging technologies in areas of mobile application development, software testing and automation, cloud computing, digital transformation, blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to provide effective solutions to customers in automotive, manufacturing, healthcare, government, and finance domains. The roster of Fortune 500 clients include the likes of GM, Mercedes-Benz, Pfizer, UPS, and even the US Army. Virtuously is recognized as a thought leader for his insights on emerging opportunities, trends, and challenges in the global economy. He is well-versed in artificial intelligence and machine learning, blockchain, and big data. Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions from the future of cryptocurrencies, because that's been a hot topic here in the Mysore Forum. Virtuously believes in leading from the front and personally mentors teams in different organizations. As a serial entrepreneur, he has also built multiple products, including iConnectX.com, which is a fundraising platform for nonprofits, CompanyTrack.com, a contact tracing and social distancing initiative, WeInvite.com, a virtual party and event management platform. Virtuously was born and brought up in Mysore. He graduated in electrical engineering from JCE in 90 and then completed a master's in control systems engineering in West Virginia Tech. He also did an executive program on entrepreneurship from the Tuck School of Business. He is married to Nandini, who's also an alum of JC. Virtuously is the son of Professor T. Shankar and Sushila, who are natives of Mysore. He now resides in Detroit, Michigan. Virtuously is a strong supporter of nonprofit and charity organizations. He is a board of directors and advisors of Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, Michigan Women in Technology, and the Wildlife Conservation Foundation in India. He is an active contributor to the Red Cross COVID Relief Fund for Karnataka. He also contributes actively to several foundations for cancer and Parkinson's research and to hospitals in the Michigan area. Virtuously is a shuttle champ who represented Mysore University and is now an avid golfer. Well, Virtuously, with such a prolific profile, I'd like to ask you, when did the bug of entrepreneurship first bite? You know, being an engineer in the 90s out of Mysore, your obvious route would have been to work for a software major. Did it ever entice you?
Good evening to all, everybody in Mysore. Namaskara. Kiran, thank you for such a nice introduction. You know, I feel good about myself hearing those things. Thank you for putting it nicely. So yes, you know, I grew up in Mysore, JC. A lot of you know. So did my wife. Entrepreneurship, actually, you know, from a young age, ever since I got into high school and college, I always wanted to do something on my own. So, and I didn't know what I wanted. So, we had a chat earlier, my primary interest was in is to not do an 8-to-5 job, start to think about starting my own business. That's all. And again, my grandfather's being in business, which were not running anymore. I would go and sit in their old offices and feel that actually I'm running the office. So that's when everything started to open up my mind. Ever since then, actually, I went about and started a number of things in Mysore. Again, without capital in late 80s, there is no way you can get any business going unless, you know, again, these days you have much more opportunities with a lot of VCs coming into play. So yeah, everything started around 84, 85, 86 from my second PUC. And I started a bunch of businesses locally, and that's how everything started off for me.
Certainly. So if I were to ask you, what kind of challenges did you face when you went to study in the US? And then if you can please tell us about your early experiences as an entrepreneur in the US.
So coming to US was itself a challenge. I never expected to go to the US. I come from a average family. Buying an air ticket was not even I thought about getting onto a plane ever in my life. So with great difficulty, I think got into admission into a couple of universities, West Virginia Tech near Charleston, Montgomery. One of the ranked about 128th in the nation, not the top schools. Obviously, I was an average kid. Those days, I think I'm average even now. Just pure hard work is what drove me to what I am today. So funding was an issue coming to the US. As soon as I came to the US, as you all know, in India we get pampered with every aspect of our life, from getting a cup of coffee to somebody driving you around. Trying to live independently was a much bigger challenge. We had immigration challenges, and most importantly, how do you pay for yourself, right? So those were some of the core things that came up. Learning was not a problem because I think, I still, SJC being one of the finest colleges that I've had experience with, gave me so much of education. So doing my master's was much of a piece of cake for me than paying my bills. So that's when I think, everything, panned out and said, look, how do I make a living? So that's when actually I started to look at all kinds of jobs, right? All hands on the deck is what we normally call here. From being a waiter to a bartender to a librarian to a meat cutter, pizza delivery guy. I was painting dorms. So I think, I think these were all actually, thinking back now after 25, 28 years, because it's almost 30 years since I came here, looks much more simple, but in all reality, every one of those jobs taught me lessons, because the very first job I applied to be a bartender, and I didn't get the job because he said I spoke too fast. Again, those days obviously my English was excellent, being the son of an English professor, but I think obviously I didn't speak the American lingo, or the choice of words and how you communicate with people was not the same thing. So I think actually those are some of the experiences what I got for early days of my college in the US. At the same time, when I wanted to start my own business, we had this hindrance of immigration, because you couldn't start a business without having a green card. And again, everywhere, you keep getting roadblocks. That only makes you more stronger and stronger as long as you're persistent and you're not ready to give up.
That's amazing. I think the amount of perseverance that you've been through is inspirational. You mentioned to me in our discussions that that you tried your hand at several businesses, including a travel agency and a couple of other businesses where things didn't go as planned. Failure is always a part of an entrepreneur's life. Even great companies like Apple, Amazon, and Tesla have failed before they succeeded. But it's up to you to examine your failures and then reorient yourself to a path of success. So if I were to ask you, before you started B2Soft, what were the learnings that you drew from your failures so that you could create a matrix for yourself to evaluate what new opportunities to explore?
Let me actually do this. Maybe I will just share my screen actually, because there is a slide that might make more sense when people see it. If I can. Okay. So I hope you can see my slide, right?
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So I think without having the billion-dollar idea, I always envied the folks in the Silicon Valley, because they came up with fantastic ideas, and every time I'm thinking about a good idea, somebody's already doing it. And the ecosystem in the Valley area, Srikanth, was super successful, and amazing to hear your story, Srikanth. I'm very impressed. I'm surprised we didn't even come across each other being from the same city. The ideas were awesome, but again, I was working in Detroit. Detroit is an auto hub, right? So automotive is all controlled by very large players, and it's dominant players. It's not easy to crack into being an automotive supplier or forget about being an OEM. So started a number of businesses. I think, for example, I started the handicraft because coming from Mysore. Let me start to sell my handicrafts from Mysore, right? So Mysore handicrafts was started, and then I started a travel agency. Then I started a distant wood dealership. Again, each one of these businesses taught me a number of lessons. For example, talking about the handicraft business, within a year or two, I realized actually, it is not scalable. It's not scalable. Even if it's scalable, the revenue and the margins and the profits that we're going to make eventually, plus all the logistics back and forth and really getting your supply chain, forget about the supply chain issue, what we have now, would have been almost a nightmare. Okay. So travel agency, a travel agency was started. Actually, we started our web agency even before Orbits came into play. I think even before Travelocity was there. But we just did not know how to bring it to market. Okay. I didn't know how to take a business to consumer idea and bring it to market, because the place where you are in, like unlike Bangalore and Mysore, like Mysore is coming up now. Bangalore is the hub in the Asia, and then Valley is the hub in the worldwide. They have this ecosystem. If I want to start a car, I can start a car here in Michigan pretty easily. It's a car company. So learning how to sell to a consumer, what a consumer mindset is, what is the experience like, was something which I had no clue about, right? So while made a little bit of money, but really lost a lot of money. But the only thing that actually I learned is the planning. I think I saw some notes from TiECon earlier about how do you plan well. Was something which I learned over the years, because at 94, I was still young. I was aggressive. I want to put my hands into multiple things, and obviously without engaging a good mentor, I also made a lot of mistakes. So Shrikant, I'm sorry, not Shrikant. Kiran, would you like me to continue on the next one?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So what did I learn? Right? I learned several things. Not so successful businesses of running it. I learned that actually your business has to be scalable. Okay, and you need to have a skill in the business, right? That is where I think I realized after going to school. Even though I did my bachelor's in instrumentation and master's in control systems and robotics, I picked up enough programming skills to be able to take up a simple programming job for businesses. So you need to have a skill. You need to have a business that can get funding from a financial institution, because when I went and talked to some of the large banks here about, hey, I got this, I also want to do some import and exports of handicrafts, what do you think about some of the fundings? And they had no clue about it. When I talked about travel, they said, look, you're picking the toughest industry on the planet. How in the hell are you going to even make money out of travel? So you need to really pick a business that has got financial viability and support from institutions. And you also want to pick a business that has got wide reach of customers. Okay. So my business that I started in the early days of my business life, was not, was going towards a very small customer base. For example, my travel agency was primarily geared towards international people, or even people of Indian origin traveling back and forth to India. So look at it, we have like less than 2 million Indians here out of 300 million population. So I'm going after a business which is less than 1% of my potential consumers, right? While I had plans to expand beyond the Indian consumer base, it's still small. So I was in the wrong side. So some of these aspects, plus obviously, I think I'm talking more on the layman terms of business. If you were to get up tomorrow in Mysore and say, look, you know what, I want to run my own business. How am I going to do it? I'm telling you, I'm the classic example. But again, there's a lot of things that you can learn from having a good mentor, because I think a lot of mentoring programs are out there. So eventually I started my own business, V2Soft. I'm going to talk a couple of minutes about V2Soft so you guys know where we are. So again, Kiran has already talked about how long we've been in business. Started in '98, a number of awards. We support multiple industries. I did want to build an office in Mysore. So in 2016, I set up a delivery center in Aadhaar. Bought my own building, very proud of it. I felt really good when I really started to create jobs back in Mysore, where I really grew up actually. So we operate in multiple countries, thanks to all my great customers, which are here from the automotive heads to the healthcare to non-healthcare. They really start to follow us. But one thing what I learned, why did I open offices in 7 different countries and all over the map, is we started to follow the customer. So we had Stellantis or FCA, used to be called Chrysler before. As they open up different centers in different countries, or they already had operations, we start to follow them. Following a customer also helps you to open up and expand operations in different countries and different cities, because you already have a captive customer, you already have a business in hand. Okay, it's a big opportunity to work on that. Only thing is, you got to be persistent and patient. Not everybody can become big overnight. Not every company is a huge .com company, right? I think so. We need to. It's only less than 1% of the company, or even less than that, really make it big, real fast. Right? Even Facebook took a while. Even DoorDash took a while. If you go back and do some of the research, they all took a while. We just see it when they come to the market for trading, and then their stocks go off, and all of a sudden, oh my God, it's a great simple idea that became big. But all the groundwork that goes underneath them to get to where they are today is something a lot of people don't realize, actually, because Facebook, for example, launched their first beta version MVP in some small city in Europe because they didn't want everybody to know what's going on, and they learned a lot of lessons, actually. So doing a small MVP makes a big difference. About we just have a group of companies. So I think started in '98. I started Shankar Infotech in '99 in India. I failed because I did not know how to run India operations. I closed it on again, started in 2003 back again, because I realized without India operations, it's going to be very hard to compete and challenge with some of the larger global IT players that are coming into the marketplace. Then I started a series of companies doing different things, whether it's buying real estate or for my own software sector, or whether it's for innovation or for products. And we started opening up in Mexico. We got in Italy. We got in different countries all over the map. Okay, so while we're in 2021, actually, we just set up our entity in Canada. Detroit, we live 30 minutes off the border of Canada, so it's much easier for us to open an office here.
With so many diverse companies in your portfolio, is there a screening technique or a matrix that you use in terms of understanding how an opportunity or how you can scale? Is there any mantra in terms of what you go back to?
So the software business, V2Soft, is the mother of all business for us, right? It drives everything for us. As we build solutions for our customers to solve their business problems, right? So most of my customers will call me and say, look, I need to like one of the largest automotive players came to us during COVID last year and said, look, I don't have an online presence. I want to sell my cars online. So, we help, so Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Fiat, Jeep, Chrysler. So every one of those brands is sold online through the digital platform that what we built end to end. So when we did those platforms, we also learned that actually we can also build products that could be launched. That's how a couple of Iconitex and the VInvite products came into play. So Kiran, we do have a mechanism today because I have a strong advisory board. Learned my lessons not to do it on my own without really thinking and ideating and taking a lot of feedback or even doing market research. So our process is to do a thorough market research and also start to look at the viability of the product and is it scalable and what's the thorough output of the product, and finally, what kind of competition do we really have? So am I the first to market? You got your own challenges, or do I have competition? So that's how we process.
I have one other question, Rajasvi. As an IT solutions company, you need to constantly stay ahead of the curve in terms of new technologies. What does this mean for you in terms of your organization structure, the processes you have, the pace at which you have to operate? What does this mean for you as an organization internally?
So I think actually, I think I saw Srikanth earlier talk about surrounding yourself with good people. I think I want to add to that. I think you want to surround yourself with good people, like he rightly said, and also trusted people. Okay, because finding good people to believe in your vision is the biggest challenge. Okay, they need to believe in your vision. They also need to believe in where you're taking this organization to. So a lot of the companies actually start to see slowdowns in their revenue or growth because they stop innovating or they stop restructuring their company as the market changes. The market actually, if you go back 20 years ago when I started, my plans would be fairly good for three to 5 years. As years went on and on, it really started to become so dynamic, so fast in the last 2 years for COVID and post-COVID. You got to be on top of your plan almost every day. And again, putting a great structure, great organization with your team, which aligns with your critical business plan that actually you believe, your core employees believe in. And also you have a buy-in from the customers, actually, because the customers also need to understand as you change your model, as you change your structure, as you change the way in which you deliver. Because we have to compete as a mid-sized technology company. I had to compete on one end with the real small pop and mom companies. I also need to compete with some of the large players, what we have in India and other countries, who really, take you to the cleaners in a second. So, for us, actually, we grew up in the time when we had the dot-com bust, then we had the offshoring happening, then we had the visa issues. While over 90% of my employees are not on any visa, they're locally in the region where we do business. The biggest challenge we have is the competition. But now I think the competition is having a challenge because they're not able to be as agile and as scalable, as flexible as a company like us can be. So I think the tables are turned back around. But is your company set up for a change in structure with such a major disruption happening in the industry? That is something which, as entrepreneurs, as business owners here on the call should think about and ask yourself a question and then be ready to change. Okay. And again, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? I think, all of you know it, but I think, for me, I think the most important thing is you need to have fire in the belly. Do you have fire in the belly? Can you do it? Most importantly, and if you can do it, nothing like that. Actually, I think then it's a matter of planning business plans, patience, persistence. We all can talk about it. But for me, actually, failure was not an option. If I fail, I had to pack up my 2 suitcases I brought and fly back to India. So I didn't have any choice actually. So I had to make it happen because I had taken the loan on the only house my dad had saved all his life, and I had nothing. So I think actually, when you're up against the wall, you're going to be all in, just like you're playing poker all in. So I know we're running out of time. I think before to open up for Q&A, I'm going to try and play it. Kiran, do you have any other questions?
No, please go ahead with the video, and then I'll continue with the follow-up questions.
I think I had selected audio too. Let me do this. Let me know, Kiran, if you can't hear the audio, please.
Certainly. Audio is fine.
Hope I got you guys thinking about having a drink now. It's about 8:30.
Fabulous video certainly makes me want to have. The only bourbon that I can get my hands on here is Jack Daniel's. So we look forward to having your whiskeys here in Mysore soon.
Yeah, I'm in the process of doing it again. Making bourbon is something which I had a passion for a long time, but I never thought ever in my life that I would ever own a liquor company. So I think, so for all of you guys, anything is possible.
That's fabulous. The pivoting from a services company to a product-oriented company, you've done that with the bourbon. You've also done that with the other products that I spoke about earlier. Can you tell us what kind of challenges you faced? Because it's a whole different animal. The business matrices are different. The business model is different. Getting into a product company is not an easy thing for a services company. A lot of IT majors have also not found it very easy. So how did you do it? What does it take to be successful in a products company for a services-oriented company?
Thank you. So Kiran, you are an expert, in the retail market. Okay, you have brought in so many products and bringing new products to market, being an entrepreneur yourself. So I'm used to running a B2B business to business. I can sell to the automotives, healthcare, tech companies. I can sell to any of them how to solve the technology problems. But what I did not know is actually how complex and difficult it is to create a consumer product and then actually make it successful. So we are still new. We launched it last year, even though I've been making whiskey for about 5 years now, because our whiskey is about almost 5 to 5.5 years old, aged in American white oak barrels. So the biggest challenge is really understanding what the market needs, what the demand in the market is all about, right? And again, I can try to go and make vodka. I can talk about the spirits, right? I can try to go and make vodka today. I can try to go and make tequila today. There's so many companies out there, okay? But what is the demand for? Why do people want to drink? And I also drink, right? I think I have an experience in drinking as well. So being a Scotch drinker and a wine drinker, I want to do something in the liquor in the spirit space, and what better way to do it in American bourbon whiskey. But I think a lot of things come into play: the packaging, the flavor profiles, because people don't like to just put soda and drink it. And I think they want to sip it, really feel the aroma in it, because that's the maturity that we are seeing. The Indian market is just starting to see it. So probably in the next 5-10 years, people will talk about, why are you mixing soda? Why are you mixing Coke? Why are you mixing water to it, right? So, and that's already there in the US market. So for me, it's a matter of, how do I bring it back to the Asian market? But again, manufacturing a consumer product with all the quality checks that is put here in the US, of course, same in India too, is something, a big learning. But the reality is, I think, once you have a brand, it's a matter of releasing other products to the same brand. Okay, I think it's all about brand building. How do you market it? But for us, I think since we have built a very strong brand in the US, V2Soft, actually, a lot of customers, companies, people know about it for 23 years. We're slowly, again, it's a different concept altogether. But obviously, Elon Musk also released his own tequila. So does a number of film stars who are releasing them. All they're doing is that they're taking a brand that they have already established and trying to marry that brand with a new product, and all of a sudden it becomes a second brand. So it's all about understanding the market, but again, releasing a brand that actually, because for us it's not about trying once. We want them to go back to the store again and again. How do you buy something that people want to go back? Because people like to buy Johnny Black Label all the time for multiple reasons, because they have consistent product, but they're also in every store they go to, and they can always see it, they like it, they buy it. For us, I think I didn't talk about the whiskey. So if you see the whiskey bottle on the front, we have double-headed eagle. That is the symbol of Mysore Kingdom. On the top eagle is the American eagle. So this is the American eagle, and this is the Gandaberunda eagle. Again, Gandaberunda with my own V on it, which means I don't have any copyright infringement issues. So I'm trying to marry the American and Indian concept into the whiskey, because bourbon is all about what is the story behind.
Fabulous. One of the questions that I have is for any budding entrepreneurs who are looking at seeking funding in the US, whether they're looking at approaching VCs or PEs in the US. I'm sure you've had a lot of experiences with VCs in the US. What advice would you have for Indian entrepreneurs seeking funding in the US?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? I've been through, while all my business have been funded by myself, but I've been through a number of pitches. And again, I still have a couple of VCs who are very interested to invest into both my software company as well as my bourbon business. So the first and foremost thing is, your friends and family funding. I always say this because, the more you give up in the early days, okay, it's going to be very hard for you because it's going to be very painful later in the day because, all of a sudden somebody puts in $100,000 today and they take 80% of your company, then you have 20% of the company. As it grows, it will be very painful. So friends and family funding is something which I always recommend as a mentor. A lot of budding entrepreneurs. When you are ready with an idea, when you go to the VCs, VCs are not there to just throw away money at a fancy idea on a piece of paper. They always look for an MVP. What is your MVP? Do you have it up and running? What's your user base? What's the revenue model? So very, very rarely do VCs fund for something like that. And also the other thing that VCs are very interested is looking at the new and emerging technologies. Okay, because emerging technologies are new and new concepts. If you have an idea, if you have a one-off idea, they are not going to accept it because I think one-off ideas. A lot of people come out with it. So look, there's Uber, but I'm going to create Lyft, which is just one-off, or I'm going to create Ola, which is two-offs. So getting funding for a one-off ideas is extremely difficult. But at the same time, if your business model for your new idea, which is going to disrupt the market, or if you are going to become that unicorn, then I think they're going to be very excited, especially if you already have an MVP running, you already have a use case. The most valuable advice I want to give all the young budding entrepreneurs is, before you put your hand into a B2C market, put your hand into a B2B market, business to business. Business to business is much, much, much more risk averse. You have a very high chances of succeeding because there are tons of companies in this globe that are so behind in technology, tons of industries, whether it's advertising, marketing, healthcare, payers, providers, right? They need so much of help. So creating a product for them, for a B2B product is probably one of the best things you can ever do. I've wasted a lot of millions of dollars into creating a B2C product, thinking I'm going to make it big overnight, but it doesn't happen.
Certainly. And as a thought leader, I'd like to ask you, in terms of trends that you see in the post-pandemic world, are there any new trends that you're seeing which you think might be interesting for the next couple of years?
Yes. So you mentioned about crypto and the interest for crypto, right? I think I think it's as the global economy starts to see the value of crypto, they are also looking at less reliance on the US dollar. While it's going to be a while before everything stabilizes, I think crypto lies on the blockchain technology. Okay, I think if you're talking about pure technology service, I think the future of opportunities, quite a bit of opportunities come in the blockchain space. But most importantly, what do businesses need during the post-pandemic era? Most of the companies learned when everything was shut down last year that actually without being online, without having a good e-commerce platform, without being technologically savvy, you're going to be out. You're going to lose your business. So we see from our service standpoint, we see a ton of opportunities from companies coming in and seeking help in building user experience, customer engagement platforms. I think we had a couple of people talk about the engagement platform that's going to really take you from where you are on your sales to the next level. Even for us, I think we are getting a ton of online leads and online sales. At the same time, customers are looking for what kind of an engagement are you going to provide. So the other aspect I'm seeing is companies are no longer telling me that you need to be a US company, you need to be right here in my neighborhood. They're saying, as long as you have the infrastructure to support it, I don't care where you are actually. So for our companies in India, companies in Mysore, this is a big opportunity provided actually, you show and tell and deliver the quality and look and feel like a company sitting right next door in the card with me. Okay, so I think there's a lot of companies looking for global resources. There are a lot of companies looking for companies that can help them in transforming their business. So digital transformation, user experience, user engagement would be something I would focus on. And if you want technology, I think we are investing a lot in the blockchain technology. I'm launching a cryptocurrency for one of my clients in 2 weeks. So I can talk about all about how does the Ethereum platform work, what do we need to do kind of thing.
Thanks a lot. I think we're almost out of time. We'll ask one last question. There's a question from Venkat. How do you manage your time? When you have so many multiple businesses, how do you prioritize your time? Because it's not easy to manage so many businesses which are at different stages of their life cycle, even B2B, B2C. How do you manage your time? How do you prioritize it?
So that is the biggest challenge I have. So that's a very good question, very powerful question. I think having 2 kids and 2 dogs and a wife, and having very close ties with my family in India, it is not easy, and because I need to make frequent visits to visit my parents, it's very time consuming and very stressful. So one of the ways actually I've started to do was, I think I've started to siphon off time, block my time and block my calendar effectively to different business units. For example, so most of my global services meetings happen all in the morning. So all my mornings are blocked for global services. So a lot of my products are in the afternoon, and my bourbon business starts at 5 p.m. And it goes until 8 p.m. if I start to have a sip with it. So I think siphoning off your time throughout the day is most critical. Obviously, you will have longer days, you'll have weekend work hours. As long as you start to manage it, it starts to get under control. But adding a new venture into when you're already running a fully established large business is something I'm going to rethink about again, because I think it has caused a lot of stress for me in trying to again, my bourbon has been my passion. So whenever I start to do my bourbon business, I really don't feel I'm working on it actually. So I'm really feeling that actually I'm enjoying it. But you don't get those enjoyments in all the things you do, because initially when you start off, it's a small, nice, cool idea. But by the time you're consumed with meetings and strategies and market surveys and market analysis. So while you need to have good people helping you with those aspects, your leaders will come back again and again, looking at your leader to say, okay, what direction do you want to go? Which angle do you want to take? So I think having a discipline in your time really makes a big difference. And I'm working on it. I'm not there yet. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, I plan to spend more time on the golf course and drinking my bourbon than actually, than sitting in the office. But overall, I think I highly recommend young entrepreneurs to start to stick to one idea, just work on it, and don't put your hands into too many things. I put my hands into too many things because, like I said, I'm not an IIT graduate. I'm not an IIM graduate. I come from a very average, being an average kid, average person trying to learn it. But my experience has taught me an enormous amount. The experience speaks for itself. When I took a course in talk, I was actually doing most of the talking because I had some ground zero experience, which a lot of the executives who came to take the class were CEOs of the companies, but we're struggling to understand why do they do some of these things. So time management is extremely critical.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time and a wonderful chat. We'll hand it over to Venkat. Thank you then.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shankar, for sharing your stories, success and failures, also what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Next,
thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have an interesting panel discussion on confessions of a startup founder. 3 youngsters from Mysuru sharing their startup founder stories. The panelists are Mr. Sandeep Rao, Mr. Rohan Ganapati, and Mr. Srivatsa Srinivasa Rao. To introduce the panelists and to moderate this session, I would like to welcome Star of Mysuru's Managing Editor, Mr. Vikram Muthana. Over to you, Mr. Vikram.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. And today we have an interesting group of people with us. And So, Rohan, are you here? And Sandeep?
Hi.
Hello, Vikram. I'm here.
Okay. Hi, Sandeep. Anyway, so we have 3 entrepreneurs here with us today, and welcome all 3 of you. And my name is Vikram Uttana. I run a local newspaper in Mysore, and all the 3 people we have today with us have a connection to our city, a little city which has produced, going by today's discussions, quite a few entrepreneurs. And first, I'd like to start with Sandeep. Sandeep is the youngest entrepreneur that I have met, and probably in this conference overall. He's 20, and he's always been a brilliant kid. And
Actually, 21.
Quite a few people in Mysore know his dad, and he's from Excel. And I think his trustee of his school, Susanwa, is also here with us today. He must be very proud to have one of his alumni here. And he has a long streak of being quite innovative since his childhood. He's won a couple of internationally acclaimed awards. He's been selected for various prizes. And he's now the CEO of Remote Roofing, about which he'll talk soon. And then we have Rohan. In fact, I wanted to meet Rohan a couple of years ago, but I never got an opportunity because I had read a story about this boy who had a connection to Mysore, who had found a way to use water to create a propulsion engine, which was mind-boggling and unheard of then. And I never got an opportunity, but today I do see him, and it's wonderful to have you here. He runs a company called Bellatrix, and we'll talk about that soon. And then we have Srivatsa, and he also has a Mysore connection, and he's gone from taking for the sake of his health, what began as something for the sake of his health, has now turned out to be a big challenge and hopefully a money spinner in time to come, and a solution for farmers. So we'll start off with Sandeep. Sandeep, you have this remote roofing company, which basically does aerial measurements and then gives you advice on how to set up roofing. Now, the interesting question, the question that I have is, you come from Mysore and we don't have roofs. We have RCC ceilings and that's it. We don't have roofs. So how does a kid from Mysore, a city which doesn't have any roofs as such, the tile roofs, go on to start a company that is completely into roofing? So
No, I think that it was more so about like an accidental, involvement within the whole roofing industry over here in the US. It kind of ties back into my past, how I've, developed different skills and identifying arbitrages within the market, things of that sort. But I think for me, it was more so like I saw a problem that my co-founder kind of, walked me through. And that was something that we, developed as time goes by, if that makes sense.
So how did you get into this? How did you get into actually the roofing part of it, the business as such?
I think it was during my gap year, like 2019. So I took a gap year post graduating from high school. So I studied in Excel public school. And after my gap year, during my gap year, I was trying like several projects. It was most about, you try so many things, what sticks to the wall, things of that sort. And there was this one instance wherein, I saw like a message in like a Discord server, which is a common platform wherein people communicate within the gaming industry, but you have different servers. And one was, towards, I guess it was startup based server. And, this guy had like an idea, hey, why don't we use computer vision to actually identify roof, sizes, things of that sort. And, back then, whenever I was, doing some more research and exploring different avenues during my gap year, computer vision was something that I explored, and exploring its, real world applications. So that kind of piqued my interest. I sent him like a direct message, like a DM, like, hey, so why don't we, schedule a call and kind of discuss more about this? And we actually did schedule a call, and my co-founder, Nathan, that was the inception. And then his application, because I personally, living in Mysore, I guess India as well, like the only exposure that you have to roofs is like tile or concrete. It's very straightforward. It's like a decision tree. It's this or that. However, over here, like we don't face, or at least the US, the number of natural calamities that affect roofs don't really reciprocate as that of, in India. So that was sort of like an arbitrage that I understood. because kind of tied into some of the stuff that I did in my earlier past.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That's interesting. And now coming to Rohan, how did you end up deciding that the audacity to, to start a propulsion engine manufacturing company? It's one of the most intimidating subjects out there. And for you in college to kind of start something like this, which is so heavy on science and tech. So what kind of took you there, and how did it start off for you?
Thank you, Vikram, for the question. Hello to all my fellow panelists virtually. I didn't think of starting a company when we wanted to prove this tech. The idea was pretty, simple. I'm a fan of space and science fiction since childhood. My grandparents are from Mysore, and it's my ancestral place. So we still go to, I have my grandmother's house there. So it's the holiday destination. But I was born and brought up in Ooty, just around 3 hours from Mysore. And the skies are so closer to you, the skies are much darker. So you kind of dream from childhood. So space has always been passion since you're a small kid. But when we wanted to do something, one thing which struck me very hard is when you look at the night sky, just imagine the distance between the stars. It's so huge, right? So what is limit? Our ancestors were all adventurers. So they moved from one place to another, settle down there. And that's in the DNA of every human being, adventurism, basically. But now, the world is such a small place thanks to technology, but have we explored the solar system? No. So the reason is simple. It's just not in our reach. It's far off. Even Mars is far. But if you want to enable something like going to Mars or something, what is that you need? You need propulsion or engines which are capable of taking you there and bringing you back with least available resources. So which is the most abundant form of fuel, if you call in the solar system, that's water. And it's available on the moon in form of ice and also in the Martian ice caps. So that's what led us in this journey. Is it possible to develop an engine using water? Of course, it's very different from the water propulsion concepts used on automobiles on ground. So this is plasma physics, as we call. So this led me on a journey, on a quest to see, can we reduce the cost of accessing space? So that if proven, I'll get an admission into an Ivy League university in the US, Princeton. I was hoping for Princeton because that's where they do research on electric propulsion. In 2012, when I was in my first year of engineering, written a paper about it and had the good fortune of meeting Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin in NASA Goddard. Okay. And where they were kind enough to take me inside to show how the facilities there. So that kind of opened up things for me, and I came back. And my co-founder, who is an SJCE product, brought up everything from Mysore, is a family friend, Yashas. We sat together, and that time Elon Musk, was actually becoming a global name. So we realized space is not just bound to governments. So it's becoming an industry. There are private people coming in. So why don't we give it a try? If we succeed, we succeed. If not, we are young. We can always go pursue our higher education. That led us to start Bellatrix. And of course, in 2015, we also got a US patent and also an order from ISRO, where we have delivered, and since we've been working with them, delivering these engines.
What does Bellatrix stand for?
Not the Harry Potter character. It's the star in the constellation Orion, Dhanush as we call it, basically. It's the most famous of all the constellations which is visible to naked eye. So we named our company one of the stars of the constellation of Orion, Bellatrix.
Now, Srivatsa, as for you, what started as an endeavor to have, towards good health has brought you here today. So why don't you just tell us about your journey and how it began?
Sure. Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on this panel. I really feel very young being with Sandeep and Rohan, and of course you, Vikram. And I love the fact that the social media posts and the way Venkat introduced me as one of the young entrepreneurs from Mysore. I'm so thankful to it. With receding hairline and whatever is left, more of salt than the pepper, I'm happy to be called one. Thanks again. Pleasure to be here. on the lighter note. Yeah, journey for me, it dates back to about 7 years ago, just out of my corporate 14 years of corporate lives building products for Institute of Higher Education across the globe. I stumbled upon IIM Bangalore for my Executive General Management program. I was very fascinated to pursue my higher education, which is when I and around that time is when I first tried my luck with a startup in the tech space. Went into during that time I went to IIM Bangalore for my Executive General Management program, and one of the topics that I picked up for my statistics project is to study where do farmers really spend their money on. That somehow just interested me quite a bit. And then while trying to do that study, we figured out a lot of the farmers are firstly clueless about what sort of inputs to be used in their production, crop production, and most of them blindly go out and then spend money buying heavy pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers and so on and so forth. Right? And more than 60% of the cost of production was being spent on that. That's something which we realized. That also told us something about how unsafe the food is to consume, which is something that triggered me to start looking at safer food options. How do we produce and consume safer food options? I think that the inspiration also for that I would draw from my dad, where I remember back in those days when we were very young kids. He used to do a lot of gardening with the open space that we had ourselves. So that's something which I always had a passion for. So started looking at safer food options, and the best thing I thought was grow it yourself, right? So we started growing food myself, and then along that journey came across my current co-founder Anil Nadi, who used to run an NGO around this. For building or for connecting people who have common interest for safe food options. We struck off very well in terms of what our core passion was about, and then that resulted in building a first agtech, not agtech, I would say agriculture startup back in 2015, which was about making safe food available to people like I and you. Right, we started working directly with farmers, sourcing the produce from them and directly selling that through a simple e-commerce model. That's how we started.
It was like a big basket kind of a okay.
Absolutely, I would say it's a micro mini basket, right? Right. So yeah, that's what we started off with. And while running that business, which we still continue to run in its sort of very small operations now in Bangalore, we realize how complex the supply chain can really get, right? When several claims that goes in making, or rather several claims are made to prove that food is safe to consume, right? And these are bold and very responsible claims that one makes. And what is the source of verifying this? When we started growing a little bit bigger in that business, we started realizing that the supply chain itself was long tail and a bit complex. So in the quest of solving that for ourselves, we started digitizing our supply chains, our farmers' data. Then all of a sudden we realized that we have not solved a problem of food traceability or the provenance of the food just for ourselves. We sort of knowingly or unknowingly built a product that could help everybody else in the food business. And that was the genesis of TraceX Technologies, for which I'm the co-founder and CEO currently.
Okay.
Running it passionately for the last 2 years, serving over 27 customers, both in the food and agriculture space. We touch upon several commodities, including fresh produce, cereals, pulses, livestock, dairy, and so on and so forth. And I have the pleasure of having the first angel investors or seed investors from Mysore as well. Ajit has been kind enough to
congratulations
scale our business since last year and then scaling now. Again, yeah, I take a pause here and happy to hand it back to you, Vikram. Thanks.
But anyway, I think your thing is about blockchain technology, which we'll talk later. And now back to Sandeep. Sandeep, as a young entrepreneur, like, how do you feel extremely challenged, and how was your experience moving from a small city like Mysore? Was it intimidating? Did you find it hard? Was it a smooth sail for you? And were there some moments where you just wanted to go to college and get back to school?
Oh, sorry. I think it was sort of like a dichotomy between, whether should I go to college or should I actually pursue something that I'm passionate about, right? You're always between the crossroads between the two. And for me, granted, I took like a gap year post my 12th board exams. I had the opportunity to actually explore my different, avenues and things that I was interested in. And I think that's something that's imperative for young kids at like the ripe age. And I think that's something that I would recommend for people that are actually, post 12th standard, to actually figure out, what are you truly passionate about? What really drives you? And if that means, taking upon, 20 different projects or like 30 different projects, so be it. Because that's something that I did personally, because, after my first gap year, towards the mid half, I was working on 20 different projects. And for me, granted, it was confusing, but it actually gave me some sort of clarity as to, okay, fine, these are some of the core concepts that core topics that I'm passionate about. Let me double down on those. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. It's not more so about, what does someone else expect me to do, things of that sort. But in terms of,
but I remember mentioning that you had a few intellectual properties that you kind of have when you were in MIT for a brief period where you did a course. Am I correct to assume that?
Sure, yeah. No,
can you just speak about that?
No, for sure. So whenever I was at EPS or like Excel Public School, I was, granted the teachers, Shantala ma'am, shout out to her, and Pavitra ma'am, and all these other teachers, we were actually provided the opportunity to actually explore these different talents and these opportunities. And that's what really brought some sort of insight as to, okay, fine, there's more to what the eye sees, which is what I think is important for every kid, or at least in this generation or my generation or the generations below me, to actually see. That's something that I had the opportunity to do, because there's a reason why I had, the exposure to the New York Academy of Sciences. Without Excel Public School or, Mr. Sudanva, his efforts, and Mr. Matthew, all these people that have actually driven these efforts, I think it's very important for kids these days to be exposed to different opportunities. For me, my personal stand case was, I was exposed to this program, the New York Academy of Sciences. And what it really taught me was that, hey, I could actually transcend these ideas that I had in my mind to like real world problems, right? So that's what really brought that innovation standpoint within my mentality, if that makes sense.
I wonder, do you feel your parents played a big part in allowing you to drop out of, not to go to college?
I think my parents have been very supportive. They've been very understanding. And I'm blessed that, they've actually been that way, because a lot of times you can have like people that are, to the iron where like, you have to go a certain way. But for me, it was most about, all right, if you've had some sort of, proof of concept, figure out it yourself, have like a plan of action, actually go forth and prove it to us, right? And that was something that I was able to do, which is what, I appreciate my parents for. Like they actually gave me that opportunity, and which is something that I hope that all kids have as well.
But do you fear somewhere that if you lost out on the college experience, or do you feel that maybe you might have lost up on some social cues that you would have otherwise experienced in college? Do you feel a sense of any loss that way, in that sense, or do you feel it's okay, it's not a big deal?
To a certain extent, yeah. You do lose that social, interaction within your.
I asked that because I assume that you interact with a lot of adults in your business right now.
It's very different whenever you're hiring people that are 60 years old and you're paying their salaries, right? It's like a very different dynamic. And when you're like 19 years old, Like it's like a very different dynamic. However, I think what's important is that you actually need to learn across, sort of like a journey. That's the way I see it, right? Especially as a young founder, like even Rohan and Srivatsa, right? I mean, it kind of ties into what the earlier speaker said, Sheshadri. So not Sheshadri, someone else. But it's most about like implementing something that actually works and building on top of that. And you are going to have, failures, things of that sort. It's just part of the process. You have to embrace it. And that's the way I see it. Because I've dealt it firsthand multiple times.
And Ron, my question to you is, you're in a business that is highly driven, highly regimented, and governments are involved. So I guess if your prosperity lies in how you deal with the governments and how you are funded mostly by government agencies to begin with. So how has your experience been, dealing with scientists who have been in this business much longer than you have, and to convince them that you actually have a viable model? And second, how do you get governments to pay or rather fund you? And where do you see yourself scaling up going forward? And how has this present government been different than the previous governments?
My first point, Vikram, is that...
Sandeep, that was a Rohan.
Oh, it's Rohan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vikram, I'll answer your last question first to begin with. So when you talk about any industry being completely dependent on the government is not a good sign, especially in India. Of course, because the domestic market is still not mature enough for a high-tech area like space or aerospace. So the primary consumer is the government itself. So when that's the scenario, this government took notice of that. And, space today globally is a $456 billion industry. By end of the year, it is about expected to cross $1 trillion. This government actually took steps to privatize space. That means now is in India, ISRO does everything space, to some extent DRDO. But now it's the capacity which is available in the country, because there are many companies, even like us, which have already been supplying to ISRO. Can we cater to the global market? So the government has got something called as InSpace. It's a new body which will enable private people to, look at the global market. It's like made in India for the world to work in space. So that's something very interesting development. And you see a lot of investors, venture capital funds, more keen to invest in space technology companies, because that was not the case when we started raising, because its gestation period is quite long compared to other companies. So now, things are opening up. That's something positive, which this government we should give due credit. Your other question was how did they take it when we first developed? Yes, so it was 2015. So we expected that they would not take it positive because, of course, they've been doing it for quite some time, and there are a few young boys who are doing something different. How would they take it? But it was very positive, and it's a good story. My other co-founder Yashas in SJCE Mysore, Dr. Kiran Kumar, the then chairman of ISRO, was the chief guest for a convocation ceremony. So by then we had successfully developed the engine for the satellites, and he goes to the stage directly and he hands over 2 sheets of paper, and his reaction is like, this is what I was looking for since the day I became chairman ISRO. And so it was the opposite that what we expected. So they go back, they figure out how to give an order, because for a startup, there's no mechanism to work, because you have to pay a security deposit or performance bank guarantees. So that's how you take government orders. But in our case, that was kind of discounted. And that's how it became the first startup to get an order from ISRO for a spin in, meaning technology which ISRO buys, not the other way around. So that actually also sent belief among other people that, yes, the guys are capable enough. And that's when DRDO came forward and also helped us with orders. And it was in 20, and we went to IISc in Bangalore, where we are incubated. And in 2019, we also became the first startup in India to raise a space-focused VC investment. So the team from 4 to 10 to now we are 50-ish people. At the same time, things started to change as well. India became a signatory to MTCR. It's a missile technology control regime, which allows you to export critical technologies outside of India. So it was a good time, I would say, but I'm happy to say Bellatrix kind of led the way for other space companies in India to also take note of it, that space can be done here. It's not just in the US where Elon Musk is, and getting money from the government is another problem that's not yet solved, even though they don't see you as a competition, point number one. In our case, they saw us as a collaborator. You're doing something unique. It fits into our puzzle. And that's what space is all about. But the money, since it comes from the, there's a CAG audit which happens. It's not easy. The tax structure is not simple 18% GST. To make the thruster, or engines, you buy components with 18% GST, but you sell at 5% GST. So still a lot of things are not clear, and the time they take to reimburse. So this issue is there. I hope things get sorted out. But yes, we kind of are now, we'll be sending our engines to space this year and early next year, and have the tag of space qualification and have plans to go global.
Congratulations. I hope it
that's been
Speaking of governments, I would like to ask Srivatsa. Srivatsa, I know you're working a lot with 2 governments, and you have worked with the Kerala government, and I'm interested because you're tracing food produce, and you had done a wonderful project with Nendra Bale from Kerala, and considering that our Nanjangud Bale is having some issues, maybe you could help. But could you talk about your experience about food tracing and blockchain, how you've used it in a very brief way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what we fundamentally do is leveraging emerging technology like blockchain. We put multiple participants across the food supply chain on a platform and help them extend their supply chain boundaries, their own data democratically to be shared with everyone else in the supply chain, so that you can build a very transparent and credible supply chain. That's what we enable organizations to do. And one of the projects that we did with the government of Kerala was identifying or probably highlighting the fact that the Nendran bananas that are grown in and around the Kerala or Cochin rather have a specific GI tagging. It's called geographical identification tagging. So where the bananas that are grown for agroclimatic conditions, the soil conditions, they're the best ones that you can consume, right? So similarly, absolutely, I would completely concur with the point that you mentioned, that Nanjangud Bale. Why can't we do that? As long as we can work with the organizations that can organize the production on the ground and look at increasing the production, increasing the visibility of the markets for consumers, or making the product premium, right? Where you would want to help farmers there. Absolutely, that's possible. We work directly with the banana growers there, and an exporter was very closely involved all through the project, where on one side, while the bananas were growing, on the other side, we worked with the National Center for Banana Research in Trichy, where the scientists were directly involved in adopting the best practices, and finally bringing all of that together and exporting the entire thing over to the UK. Which eventually ended up giving at least 30 to 40% more premiums for the farmers. So those are things that we could do. We work in multiple value chains, like I said before, dairy, eggs, and all the GI tagging. In fact, right now, we are pursuing opportunity with the central government for building a blockchain-based layer for all the GI tag products. It's not just about food. There are many products that are GI tagged. That's what we're working with one of the central governments. Very, very encouraging, as Rohan said. I think the digital disruptions are quite possible with the current government, and there's encouraging intent. Both we work with government of Telangana as well for seed traceability. I'll pause there.
Next question is, sorry, my question is like to all three of you, because we're running out of time. It's just that I noticed that all entrepreneurs start their business out of passion, and there's love for what they do. But somewhere, as the whole funding process begins, I noticed like, a couple of years down the lane, most of the entrepreneurs or founders are more involved in the accounts department than the creative and the technology part of it. So among three of you, have your experience that you have been more exposed and spending more and more time with the funding aspect of the business rather than the creative, the one that triggered your passion to begin with? Sandeep, you can go first.
Well, I believe that funding and building a product goes hand in hand, right? Because at the end of the day, product is what sells the customers, and that's the way we started personally as a company, Remote Roofing. Because the way we started it was, how can we get customers to pay to begin with, as opposed to how can we get as many users on board as like 3 users, So for us, that was the primary rationale. And I guess it goes hand in hand with 2 co-founders, because one co-founder has to focus on the product, so to speak, and the fundraising, and they both go hand in hand.
What about you, Rohan? What about how's it in your business?
By the way, I like the confidence which Sandeep has at his age, which we didn't have regarding handling money. But yes, so I stick to tech alone. There's a clear distinction between me and Yashas, my other co-founder. He's a cutthroat, stingy person, but very capable. I call him Chanakya. But there's a clear distinction. So he looks after anything money and selling, development, operation stuff, and I focus on tech. And since this founder trust is very important for a successful company, that's something which we've realized. And as you said, it's equally important to maintain the passion, because if you don't do that, you stop innovating. And in a competitive world, if you don't innovate, your product doesn't sell longer. So that's true for space as well. So that's why, so you need a founder whom you can actually trust upon.
And Srivastava, in your case, I think it's been a while, your company's.
Yeah, we've done one reasonably good fundraise, and that's exactly where I said I have the pleasure of having that being supported by entrepreneurs and investors in Mysore. But I always very strongly believe that you have to balance the act of creating value and valuations. Value for whom? Customers, employees, and everyone else that are associated with it. At the same time, it's very important to build the valuations as well from an investor standpoint, so that there is value that eventually that they can unlock as well. And my strong feeling is that if you build the product right, if you get your product market fit sooner than later, definitely funding will come through. I don't see that as a huge roadblock, but you have to get your fundamentals right, and definitely very, very important to build value and valuations.
Since the discussion is called Confessions of a Startup Founder, it would be appreciated if you guys can confess about one thing that you fear, or a confession about some particular aspect of your journey that would help other entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs from a small city like Mysore, since all you guys are like, have some connection to a small city, like, of course, to Mysore.
So I'll go first. Okay, Rohan, if you want, you can.
You please go first.
Yeah. So the confession, the bold confession that I would have is several times, you feel clueless, and I think that's absolutely okay, right? And that's how it has to be for an entrepreneur, in my opinion. And those clueless days are the ones that will help you get to the clarity. And don't be bogged down upon it. Maybe that's always going to happen, and that will remain forever as long as you're an entrepreneur at heart. So that's my confession and my advice as well.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Rohan, you have one?
Yeah, I would like to say to our fellow budding entrepreneurs that don't leave Mysore. The government is kind of now looking very seriously about how to enable the ecosystem in tier 2 cities. Everyone coming to Bangalore doesn't help. For us, it was a difficult choice because ecosystem didn't exist back then. ISRO, IISc, everything is here. But now COVID pandemic, what taught us is kind of you can work wherever you are. And so Mysore is the next go-to destination. And I sincerely believe that, and something I would like to confess about. So, and advice, if you call it as an advice for any budding entrepreneurs out of the city, investors are everywhere. It's a virtual world connected through space, and please stay in Mysore.
Sandeep, in your short and aggressive span as a entrepreneur, how has it been? Any confessions that you'd like to make? Interesting one that people should be aware of if they want to mimic your adventure of dropping out from college and trying to establish something.
Take asymmetric bets. Take bets that people don't like, society doesn't encourage you to. Just take those, because at the end of the day, like, you are your own self. Take bets that you think are in the best interest of you, which is what I've done, and it's led me to somewhere, right? And I think that's the same for everyone. There's a reason why I'm over here, and there's a reason why I've gotten over here. There's a reason why I'm going over there. So I think that's the way people need to think. You don't constrict yourself to a certain mentality, or at least a certain bubble. Bubble doesn't exist.
But Sandeep, I also would like to know, like, from you guys, what is your attitude towards fear? Fear of this not working out, and what next? Like, how do you handle it? Do you have it? Sandeep, of course, is too young. I mean, and he's had a streak of this. So I guess I would ask Srivatsa, because I would say we are alike. And
exist, Vikram. Fear doesn't exist, right? If fear exists, right, you're subconsciously priming yourself towards some sort of confinement, right? Unless you have those bounds, across, or at least not there, non-existent, right? So you have the sky towards your potential. Like, why not? You're young. Do what makes you happy. Do what makes you think is going to actually get you somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like I'm speaking to Osho, Sandeep. It seems very philosophical and hopeful. Thank you so much. And Ron, how do you handle it? I mean,
so we have to embrace fear. That's what I would say, Vikram, because
that's what Sandeep was saying too. I mean,
the reason is because when you build something for space, if something goes wrong, you cannot send a service person to go and service it in space. So you should ensure that whatever failure happens on the ground. So you come up strong and build something world class. Especially space, we don't have another option. You say 6 Sigma, right? It has to great quality. Space is above 6 Sigma. It has to.
Yeah. Shrivatsa, what about you as a person who's a little older, and what do you feel? What is your perception about fear of a business failing, or how you deal with it?
I see it. I think that I guess there's a lot of people that are viewing this conversation. The first thing is actually to make the first step, which is what is imperative. And that's something that I've realized as like I guess young entrepreneur, so to speak, which is what is required. This is what our society, as like Gen Z, as people of the younger generation, this is something that we need to do actively. At the end of the day, like, we're trying to advance humanity, be it roofing, be it space, be it this, be it that. I think at the end of the day, it is taking action as opposed to being complacent. And a lot of times we subject ourselves to this complacency, which I think is not as optimal, right? It's not optimal. I mean, ideally, we want to establish more innovations, things of that sort. At the end of the day, there's a reason why Elon Musk is at the stage where he is at, right? It's because he's taking those risks. There's a risk to reward ratio. And I think the same thing is applicable to every single person out there. And I think India per se, and as an Indian, we have like a ripe opportunity to actually expand that horizon. And I think it's like we are at the forefront, and it's for us to actually accelerate and expand that horizon, so to speak.
Yeah. Srivatsa, you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying that the best thing that I would do is to go out and try to conquer it, which means that you just have to try. If something you're feared about, you just give it a try. If you fail, you've learned something. It's not failure, right? I think Srikanth put it really well in his presentation, and that's how I would look at it. And just one more point I want to add, probably from the previous one, is I think the hardest part of building a startup is building the teams. Once you have the right teams, build your founder minus teams earlier in the day. Earlier in the life of the startup. Once you have the team in place, the products can be built, customers can be won, revenues can be generated, right? But hardest part is that to do, and that will also you will have people who can share your fears and then help you come up with solutions for those to deal with those fears.
I would agree to a certain extent, Mr. Srivatsa. But I think it's more so about, identifying problems, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to find solutions to certain problems, and you can have, X number of people solving Y number of problems. But, that's at the end of the day, if you're trying to expand humanity from like X to Y, that's the way you go about it. If that makes sense.
Anyway, thank you guys. We're out of time, and we don't have any questions. So I guess thank you so much for participating, Rohan. Sandeep, thanks for waking up so early to be with us. Shivatsa, thank you. And I know you're in Mysore. Hopefully we'll see you soon. And all the best to all you guys. And I hope in years to come, I'll see you all prospering and, as Sandeep suggested, solving problems and taking us to greater heights. So thank you so much, guys. And see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I would like to thank all the panelists in sharing your stories and confessions as founders. Your views helps budding entrepreneurs what to expect. Thanks to Mr. Vikram in moderating this session. Next, we have a very special session to talk about a perspective on inorganic strategy, that is. For this session, we have two panelists from Orion Innovation, Mr. Raj Patil, CEO of Orion Innovation USA, and Mr. Venkatraman Balasubramanian, Senior VP and Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences. For this, let's welcome TiE Mysuru Charter Member, Dr. Mahesh Rao, to introduce the panelists and to moderate this session. It's all yours, Dr. Mahesh.
Thank you very much, Venkat. And welcome to TiE Mysuru. This is our third edition of TiECon. We are all excited to have you, Raj and Dr. Bala, here. And I'm sure both of you are as much excited to be here. It's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce Raj Patil, our SJCV alum, Mysurean, to all of you. And Dr. Bala, who missed being a Mysurean by a whisker, will be talking about that also. We have about 35 minutes total, and we will take few questions at the end if time permits. So let me start with the introduction of Raj Patil. Raj Patil is the Chief Executive Officer of Orion Innovations, simply called Orion, a fast-growing global technology firm that enables digital transformation with solutions rooted in digital strategy, engineering, and experience design. With over 5,000 associates across US, Europe, and Asia, the firm delivers automation solutions to Fortune 1000 companies in the financial and professional services, communications and media, professional sports, entertainment, healthcare industries, so on and so forth. Prior to joining Orion, he was the president and COO of Liquid Hub, acquired by Capgemini. In his previous roles, he was a co-founder of eSpark, a company focused on developing technology solutions for large enterprises in digital interaction space. He received an MBA from the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, MS in Computer Science from Villanova University. He is born and brought up in Mysore. Raj Patil graduated from Sri Jayachamrajendra College of Engineering, my alum, University of Mysore, with a BE in Computer Science. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Dr. V. Balasubramaniam. He is a PhD, MBA, and he's a Senior Vice President, Head of Health Sciences at Orion Innovations. He's a native Bangalorean, having gone to school there, and graduated from BMS College of Engineering, Basavangudi. He has completed MS in Computer Science at New Jersey Institute of Technology, USA, and MBA, PhD from Rutgers. He was supposed to be a medical doctor from Mysore Medical College. This is the whisker which I was talking about, and decided not to join in the last minute, but to work with medical professionals for the rest of his life by earning his doctorate. So he could be a true doctor by earning a PhD. Now, the senior vice president and head of the healthcare and life sciences division at Orion Innovations. Prior to Orion, he was a co-founder and CEO of Cabios, a niche life sciences services firm, where he was responsible for strategy, leadership, and vision for a cloud platform called Realme to transform the regulatory value chain for life sciences. He was the recipient of the Albert Einstein Award for Innovation as part of New Jersey Immigrant Entrepreneur Award in 2016. For more than 30 years, he has been in the business of developing and delivering innovations, information management, solutions for companies such as Bristol Myers, Squibb, Aventis, Roche, Merrill Lynch, AT&T, Bell Atlantic, and IBM. He's an author and a speaker at various emerging topics. He also serves as a member of Industrial Advisory Board for the Masters in Business and Science program at Rutgers University. Thank you very much for both of you. Dr. Bala, thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. And I hope you have had your coffee for the day and you're all perked up for this question and answer sessions, trying to make sure that you feel more at home during this time.
We are.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity.
TiE Mysuru loves to have you here and maybe in person sometime. Raj, you indicated in your conversation that you grew up in Mysore of yesteryears, and I'm sure you have visited Mysore recently. Can you please take us through your experiences from those times to your recent visit? What has changed? What remains the same for us to kind of have a nostalgic feeling about Mysore?
Great. First of all, namaskar, Elargo. Great to be here, and this is very special for me personally, given my Mysore ties, as you said. Look, I was born in Mysore, grew up in Mysore. My early childhood was schooling was at DMS, college was JCE. I lived in Manas Gangotri campus for a number of years. My father was a professor in the university, so amazing memories of growing up in Mysore. Of course, I visit very often. I have my extended family in Mysore, and visit them regularly, and friends, etc. So I am in Mysore at least once a year or once in a couple of years for all these years. Of course, a lot has changed. Mysore has grown into a much larger city, and things like what we're doing here today are signs of what has happened with the city. But to me, we all know where Mysore has reached today or arrived. But I think what is more important to me is there is a special, I feel, it could be cultural, it could be other aspects. There is a special bond, I think, with Mysoreans. And that has not been lost. I go back to my childhood to today, to meeting new people from Mysore all over the world. There's a special bond that is sort of unsaid. It's hard to put your finger on it, but that is something that was always there. And I think it continues, be it business, be it cultural. I think that's special. And I think that is something that should be nurtured, in my view. So that's what is, I think, continue to be special about Mysore for me.
Thanks, Raj. Well, you have been in Bay Area and you talked about that, and you have been in New York now. And whether it is Bay Area or New York or whatever, the travel seems to be one of the biggest impediments there, whether you take the 880 or 101 or the bridges and the tunnels in New York. This travels usually drains your creativity, energy, etc., right? So what do you miss? How you manage that? Of course, Dr. Bala, you can also chime in. I mean, if you want to compare that to Mysore, you are free to compare. From one end of Mysore to other end, we could go in about 30 minutes on a busy day and 20 minutes in an easy day.
No, first of all, there's no comparison. My commute in Mysore school days was I lived a 5-10 minute walk from the school. So that was my commute. And the longest commute I had was a 20-minute bike ride to JC. So by the time you changed a few gears, you were already in college. So there's no comparison. Clearly, of course, times have changed now, last couple of years with COVID, etc. So it is stressful. It is stressful to especially if you're under the gun, juggling between meetings, etc. It does drain a lot out of your day, and it takes your hour on each side of your day. That is 2 to 3 hours. Now, on the flip side, the way I manage it is I don't fight the traffic. I use trains, as an example, going into New York. On the flip side, it gives me that time, to do some reading or calls, etc. So, you figure it out, but very hard to compare. I don't think we'll ever get those days back.
Bala, any thoughts, Dr. Bala?
Yeah, I mean, namaskar, Largo. I'm definitely with Mysore. I have special memories because my dad used to take us on one of those trips and all that. So definitely, and I believe the city is definitely multicultural. It's well managed, well designed. I'm sure it's still the same. We have fond memories of the place, including my visits to Mysore Medical College when I declined my admissions to the college. In any case, I think with technologies, with Bluetooth and all that, definitely you don't feel the distance when you're driving, right? You can actually be engaged. Even while coming this morning, I had a call. So I think you are kind of engaged. Obviously, you have to pay attention to your traffic and all that. But I think things have changed. To Raj's point, try to avoid these high traffic days, things like that. But anyway, technology is definitely helping us.
Good. So now let's dive into your specialty, Raj, which has been to manage effectively the M&As for the scale-up in corporations. How does Orion Innovations, under your leadership, able to grow in the past 3-4 years through organic and inorganic ways? What has worked for you and what has been difficult? You can just take us through that. Scale-up is always a very interesting topic for all of us who have been entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, happy to do that. So I'll take you back sort of the 5-year journey. I came here and took over Orion, which was at that time a small private equity backed company, and I saw a lot of solid foundation 5 years ago. So just quickly, the journey has been, the company at that time was 70-ish million in revenues. Today we are clocking 350-ish million. So 5 years, 5 times of revenue growth is what we've achieved. But that's on the scale side. But more importantly, there was a certain vision when we came in, and we came into, at least the thesis for me and the team was to disrupt the services space, specifically in digital transformation. The belief was that there is an opportunity, there is a need for a new type of player to disrupt that space. And an opportunity to build a $1 billion company, as an example, right? So how do we go about that? So the M&A was not a roll-up strategy for us. I don't believe that works really well. So M&A was really, we established, let's call it an architecture for the firm. And what should that firm be in 5 years, 10 years? And today we've stuck to that architecture. All of M&A has been something that fits that architecture. And basically it was about creating a firm that brings agility at scale. We believe that's what is needed. Creating a firm that has deep technology capability, firm that has deep domain capability and a global footprint. We did not want to be heavily weighted any one geography. We wanted to be global. Just so that I know you mentioned 5,000. Today we are 6,000. We announced another transaction yesterday. We added 1,000 people in LATAM. So we are 6,000 people now. Again, that goes to the strategy. So the journey was about that. The journey was how do you fuel organic growth through, how do you speed and create that velocity through inorganic strategy? So that's how we set out, and happy to go deeper as you want.
Good. One of the major things which I see when whether you acquire a company or whether you grow very fast, the clash of cultures which happens, not invented here syndrome, various things, so to speak, that could be due to egos or the lack of synergies between the acquired company and the acquiring company. How do you foresee those before the acquisition and then manage that? Any recipe? Maybe Dr. Bala can kind of help you out here because he's one of the companies which you acquired, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll give you my
maybe both of you can have a conversation to take us through that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I'll give you my perspective and we'll see if Bala thinks it worked or not, right?
I hope he contradicts you.
Let's
it
see.
would be interesting.
Let's see. Look, I think part of what you just said is while it sounds nice of what we've achieved in 5 years, it was a bit of a high risk strategy, right? In general, M&As don't work. I mean, that's a given. Everybody understands that. They never pan out. So it is a high risk strategy. And I think a few things, and it's not like we figured it out, we know it all. A lot of lessons learned for us as well. But a few things for me, first thing is, and if there are consultants on, pardon me, no disrespect, but don't use consultants for integration. It'll never work. You have to, me as the CEO, I'm the chief integration officer. If you don't start there, that's when things start breaking. But more importantly, that there has to be a very, very thought through rigor in the criteria that you establish for the M&A. And the third, so that's the second thing, right? If it fits your strategy, then a lot of the hurdles go away. Third thing is trust and transparency, right? Don't use earnout as a mechanism to reduce purchase price. I mean, that's not the concept. That should not be the, if earnout happens, everybody is successful. That should be the goal. Things of that nature, extreme trust and transparency, and be very, very clear and direct about expectations both ways, even before the deal is done. I think there are a lot of lessons learned around that. And I'll let Bala comment. I mean, he's been now, what, 2 years now?
2.5 years, yeah. Thanks, Raj. The very fact that we're sitting next to each other shows that we have no ego. So that's the first thing, right? So that's important. I think from what I've seen, right, when we first started, we were looking out for scale. And when I met with Raj the first time, there's something called chemistry, right? And that really clicked. More than culture. So culture is more organizational thing. There's chemistry first, right? And the chemistry was great. And I was meeting Raj for the first time, and it worked well. Subsequent conversations were great. His team was great. Our teams were great. Ultimately, you need to, if you're on the journey of being acquired, you need to believe in the broader mission, and you need to take advantage of that. So being part of the bigger culture is important. And the fact that the cultures were similar was an additional bonus, right? So we were able to integrate better. It's not just Raj's team being integrating, but I also have to set the leadership on my side to actually integrate and make sure that our teams are integrated well, right? And the main reason being we wanted to leverage the scale, and that's important. And it comes from the top, and we need to work with the rest of the teams to be part of the bigger picture.
And Bala, you should give a plug to TiE, but just that Bala,
sure.
If people know, Bala and I met when I was speaking at a TiE event in New Jersey. He came up to me, and that's how we met.
Exactly, and it was that conversation was a big hit, and I've never seen Raj before that. And in fact, even for the TiE meetings, that was the first time I ever attended, and it was meant to be. And I met with Raj, and subsequent history, right?
So in essence, what you're saying is that TiE has a intellectual property on your meeting, and
exactly. Yeah. Tied us together. Yeah.
Look, I think if I can add one other thing is, I think once a transaction happens, it's so important to forget about who bought who.
Correct.
Right? That doesn't matter. That really shouldn't matter. It is about how do you create value jointly, right? And we've done 8 transactions in the last 5 years. 9 actually, and some are small, some are much larger, some doubled our company. And so if you get away from that and said what is the right thing for your clients, always starting outside in versus inside out, I think sets a good level for the dialogue of integration.
And to Raj's point, we've actually, our own business unit has tripled in the last, just as the company's grown 3 times in the last 3 years, we've also benefited from that. So yeah, it's been a win-win.
Yeah, definitely. But at the same point in time, you're now part of a bigger organization. So some of the creativity, some of the agility, some of those stuff might have been lost, or is it you still keep
not
it?
really. That's the interesting part. Where I always tell Raj. Raj is a pretty macro, big picture kind of person, and so is the rest of the team. So in terms of running our, like, let's say my business unit, we totally have the same freedom, same creativity, the same innovative approaches we've had before, right? It's the bigger umbrella that's supporting the broader growth and the vision. So Raj is definitely a big supporter, and he believes in empowerment. And for me, as long as I know what I'm supposed to be doing, plus be part of the bigger vision, and that big picture mentality from Raj helps us out as well. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Something which Raj mentioned about the trust of important stakeholders in these. How did he? Of course, you had a chemistry with him, all of that, but during the whole process, how did he gain your trust, Dr. Bala? Was it, definitely money is part of it, but, the chemistry is another part of it, but still there are a lot of other things, right? Can you just elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so I can definitely talk to that. So a couple of things, right? And some of the leadership team members, like the CFO and others who were part of the due diligence team, and we really hit it off. It was not like, we are buying you and, so you do this, right? Interestingly, we were also kind of well geared, well set up for these kinds of discussions, and anything that was requested by them, we could easily produce in a matter of hours. So it's you being prepared. You also have to trust them. They have to trust you, and that comes from personal interactions with everybody, right? And that was a good experience for us, and that actually increased the trust beyond the personal chemistry I'm talking about. And it goes back to the culture aspect as well, right? And it helped. And Raj,
so my perspective is, look, all the talk is nice, but the only way to build trust is you be very clear, whether it's good news, bad news, very clear, and do what you say you're going to do, or if it's not working, call somebody on the carpet and have that conversation. That's the only way to do this. Trying to avoid the hard discussion, trying to not set the right expectations. We've had our discussions. We had, I'll give you a live case, right? We had a certain structure we got into on an earn-out structure. And over the last 2 years, we realized maybe that structure was not the right structure, right? So we went back to the drawing board and said, look, but the point is we got to make this work. Mm-hmm. So how do we rethink about this and have the hard decision? Have the hard decision and come up with an answer. I think trust really builds through actions as opposed to just words.
And trust is built through performance, of course.
Yeah. Performance, transparency, biggest thing. Yeah. So, Raj, this is one of the questions which I always have for people who go through the M&As. Has there been any instance where you had to pull out from the M&A at the last minute? And how did you manage it? How did you handle that such a difficult situation? Because you played with somebody's aspirations, how so to speak, and whatever. Whatever the thing is. It didn't work out. It didn't work out. Of course. Yeah, that's also is there, right? So can you just take us through the, turbulations at that time and the, right, mental agony, whatever. The sleepless nights.
Yeah, look, you're right. Obviously, we have those experiences. Everything doesn't go right. And I've been on both sides, on the sell side and the buy side on that, right? So I can tell you from both sides the agony or what it takes. One example is we were in recently 2 years ago, another deal, great company, really liked. But as we got through the process, and I keep going back to this trust thing, which it is so important. As we started getting through the discussion towards the tail end, how you get that feeling of sort of things shifting, right? And if things start shifting at that point, it's going to shift later too. And if it shifts for the right reason, it's okay. So I had that situation, and literally and I'd got my board aligned, my board had met this company, I had my banks aligned, all that stuff was in place. And I just said, look, this doesn't feel right. And called it off. Again, good company. But I had to have that tough discussion with the founder on the other side, right? As to why. And again, I think it was just being very direct. Look, here are things that don't seem right, and there's no sense in bringing you in and you not being successful and us not being successful. On the sell side, we've had similar experience where an opportunity to create value. We had to go back and say, look, this doesn't make sense right now. It sounds great, but there's a lot of disappointment on the other side because the deal was almost done, and they felt that we should have done it, but it didn't make sense to our employees or investors. So yeah, these things happen, and but focus. I've always said M&A, no M&A, all of this. Look, if you build a good business, all of these things is okay, right? If your building of the business is dependent on all of this happening, you can never count on M&A as a strategy. If it works out, great. So the one thing that we say is, look, focus on building a good business. If M&A comes along, great. If it doesn't happen, it's not like your core business is suffering.
So, I mean, you talked about both the sell side and the buy side. How did you handle the personal aspect of it? The person whom you met, you had some rapport with the person. Did you meet him in person? I mean, he, she, whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, did you meet them in person? I mean, can you give us a little bit of an idea of what happened there? I mean, there must have been some, really tough things, emotional things. Maybe you can just take us through a little bit of that to give us an idea of, what happens there.
Yeah. No, I think what happens, look, clearly there is the emotional side, especially, everybody gets so invested in a deal, right? As you progress, that's a given, right? You get invested in emotionally. And when you have that discussion, I'll just pick the other side, have the discussion of, hey, this is not right. There are two ways it goes, right? One is, hey, why did you do this to us? Type of discussion. And two is, once you make a decision, that is even a harder part. Once you make a decision, sometimes people come back and say, I didn't mean that, or we did this. How about we do it that way? Once it's done, is how we should think about it, because that's where the emotional, you have to rip the bandage off. That's the only way. There is no easy way to do this. And business is business. And look, so we've stayed in touch, by the way, and there's a lot of mutual respect. So I think people respect that. If you again goes to the transparency and being direct.
Good. I mean, one question which I have is that the typical issues which you see in these kind of M&As compared to an organic scale up. Could you just talk about top two issues? From Bala's side as well as from your side, Bala's side from the perspective of M&A, the top two issues from your side from the perspective of, maybe a natural grow, organic grow to M&A, something like that. So that, maybe the top two issues.
Yeah. I think the top issue in terms of, if I understand the question right, top issues in making it successful. What are the
exactly?
Okay.
Exactly.
So here's how we have approached it, right? And it all goes back to integration. First, assume it's a fit. Assume it fits your strategy. That's a given. So that's the first part. But in terms of integration, we've sort of thought about it always outside in. The first thing we do is look at, I forget who bought who, look at the clients. And we've had instances where, we could have, in Bala's case, much smaller company we acquired, but they had a much stronger relationship with this one client. We aligned the entire rest of the company behind that account team, as opposed to say, we acquired you, so now somebody in our healthcare team is going to take over that account. That doesn't work. So top issue is that. Second issue is, integration for the sake of integration doesn't make sense. What is this? What is the value of me trying to integrate my Nizhny Russia center with my Kochi India center? There really is no value. So we just leave it alone and we say, look, there are local cultures. And I think that's something we're pushing very hard. While we're global, we're saying talent is local, right? So we really encourage local culture. We try to keep it. We keep sort of fueling it. We have 13, 14 big centers around the world now, different cultures. And I saw a question from Sudhanva. Hey, Sudhanva, a long time we haven't met, but I saw a question about how do you do that? I think the secret is certain things are global, but the rest is local. Recognize that, and clients like that. Clients come to us because they get a local. So there's a reason they come to us, right? So that's been the two things. Integration for the sake of integration doesn't make sense. Always think of sort of the outside in. Don't destroy the value that why you're buying because of clients. End of the day, and so if you destroy that, the M&As don't work.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I noticed coming from a smaller entity to a bigger entity was the amount of process and rigor, right? Obviously, we had more control over certain things, hiring and so on, right? And obviously, the process sometimes kind of impedes progress. But having said that, we also have to adapt, right? And the thing is that we could go back and give some suggestions, and because certain processes have been built over the period of time, even before Raj's time, right? So sometimes you have to really work with the system and the people to kind of correct things, and which people are amenable to, right? And that's important, right? You need to be part of the process of fixing things, right? Not just complain, right? That's one thing. Raj, you want to add to that?
No, the only thing to add, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs on here today, and different size of companies. You have to be prepared for M&A. You got to let go of some things. If you're going to go get acquired, things are going to change. It's that simple. Going into it thinking it's not going to change will not work. I mean, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt the bigger strategy, and you're going to destroy value. So I've always said to, when I talk to entrepreneurs, that at any given time, you got to be ready for either being acquired or to acquire. Just assume you're going to do one of those two things, and don't think about it as when I get there, I will think about it. Even internal processes, your simple things like financials and having the right infrastructure internally, small, large, doesn't matter, but you have to be prepared for it. Right. If you're not prepared, don't do it.
You have to be prepared always, right? Yeah.
Okay. Good. One of the questions which most of the time we ask about is that from the customer perspective, there was synergy between you two companies, the two companies which merged for whatever the reasons were. And from the customer's perspective, you touched upon it a little bit, Raj. What is the differentiator now? I mean, is there any differentiator which you want to give, or being big, it's like the elephant in the room, right? I mean, the customer may feel differently now, compared to the agility that they had with a smaller company. Dr. Bala and both of you may be able to talk about a little bit, and we can take up our questions. Maybe we are in the last 5 minutes of the segment. Sure. You can just briefly talk about it, and then we can start with any questions that they have.
Yeah, I can take a few seconds. Look, one of the things is in the acquisitions we made, as an example, let's take Bala's case here. While they had a deep relationship in a certain area, they hit a ceiling because our strategy is to work with large enterprises. So we look for companies that have hit that ceiling just because of size. You're doing great work, but large firms, like it or not, scale matters, right? They say, look, I can give you only so much business because it's too much risk to give business to. So we look for companies like that where we can take that ceiling off with our size, right? That's sort of core to our strategy. But when we take the ceiling off, we don't take the agility off. That's the whole agility at scale concept, right? Saying now you have a larger player, but same agility, global scale, and take that. So there's hopefully a natural growth that just happens without you doing too much, just by taking the ceiling off.
Right. Just to add to that, right? And in fact, this client which Raj was talking about, they liked our agility, but they didn't like our scale. And the fact that we now have scale, it has opened up a number of doors within the same client. And that's really improved our visibility, increased our visibility. And more so, the global presence is also kind of bringing visibility for other clients who have European presence and who want things in Europe and so on. So
we can take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. And one question which is there, how do you align cultures when you acquire multiple businesses in a short span of time? I guess that's what Sudhanma is trying to ask. And I think, Raj, you might have seen that question, but I guess that's what we may want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I think two things. When we acquire, we are very clear that we want to bring the leadership along and have them play bigger roles, right? So far today, all the leaders, pretty much 100%, we've retained them. And there are times where leaders or entrepreneurs have come in and said, look, I can give only 2 years to this, right? That's fine too. How do you facilitate that? So it's not a bad thing. That's what entrepreneurs do. They go create value, go do the next one. So how do you do that? And in terms of culture, I think common themes. What we say is, look, we've talk about culture. We've acquired companies in Russia and companies in now Latin America or on and on, Eastern Europe. Very different cultures. I think if you focus everybody around, look, client servicing, that intense focus on client delivering quality to the client, part A. Part B is sort of, deep technology is what we're about. It's few themes like that, right? Agility at scale. I think if you align that and then let the local culture flourish, it seems to work for us. So don't try to change it because you can't. Is the point.
Thank you so much. If I don't see too many questions, I think we are pretty much running out of time. We are about 8:30, about a minute after that. Thank you so much, Raj. Thank you so much, Dr. Bala, for taking the time. Sudhanma is saying that, thanks for your clarity. Thanks. Nice to see you. So I think, Raj, you have, quite a few people who love you here. So I think you should come and stay with us for a couple of months. And
I would love that. Nothing more than that. All I can say is, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And to some extent, I must admit, I'm jealous of a lot of you that you're getting to do this from Mysore. So I'm quite jealous of that. But look forward to seeing you all in person.
Okay, Ajit and everybody, thanks you from the TiE Mysuru board.
Ajit and I went to college together. We were classmates, so a lot of good news. Yeah.
And thank you, Dr. Maheshwar. Thank you to TiE Mysuru, and thanks everyone. Thank you. This was a great forum.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bala, and we will hand it over to Venkat. Back to Venkat. Thank you, Venkat.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thanks to Raj and Bala Subramanian in sharing strategies on inorganic growth. It's always good to learn from the industry veterans. It's been wonderful to hear from all the speakers today. We are coming to an end of this evening's program on various topics presented brilliantly by all the speakers. So now to deliver the vote of thanks, I would like to call upon Manyata Mahesh, a student member of TiE. Manyata. Over to you, Manyata.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Manyata Mahesh, student member of TiE Mysuru, and it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. It's been an engrossing 2.5 hours of very informative session today. Thanks to insightful perspectives from all the speakers and panelists. It's been a very educative experience for all of us, especially student members, to sit through these sessions. I'm sure this will go a long way in preparing us for our careers ahead, especially as an entrepreneur. The success of today's event is largely because of the speakers who have taken out their time to be with us and share their perspectives. A big thank you to Shrikant Nadamuni for his address towards an entrepreneur's journey from startup to scale up. To me, the highlight of his talk was when Sir walked us through the journey from small startups to leading one of the largest projects the world has seen in Aadhaar and interesting technology behind it. I must mention my deep sense of appreciation for Varchasvi Shankar for the fireside chat with Kiran Ranga. We all enjoyed listening to his journey from Mysore to being a versatile and multifaceted entrepreneur, creating so many jobs, not only in India, but also around the world. Further, I'm grateful to Sandeep Rao for his exciting story about a casual pursuit in the gap year, leading to interest in computer vision and then remote roofing. Rohan Ganapati for a story behind a childhood wonder and sense of adventure, leading through his story of his Bellatrix Aerospace, specializing in in-space propulsion systems and orbital launch vehicles in space technology. Srivatsa Srinivasa Rao, where we went through his journey of how he introduced a leading blockchain-powered traceability platform that creates transparent and traceable agri and food supply chains, for their excellent perspective on Confessions of a Startup Founder. Thanks to Vikram Muttanna of Star of Mysore for the fabulous job of being the moderator for the panel and bringing the best out of the panelists. And I also would like to acknowledge my gratitude to Raj Patil and Dr. Bala of Orion Innovation for walking us through their journey of innovation and perspectives of inorganic strategies while lighting the path to budding entrepreneurs. Thanks to the Jatri team for managing the logistics support to make this virtual event happen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels started rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and a bird's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of a very motivated and dedicated colleagues, including all TiE members and office bearers who know their job and are result-oriented. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. Thanks for being with us this evening. It has been a great pleasure. On behalf of TiE team, this is Manyata signing off. Thank you.
Thanks, Manyata, for that. Thanks everyone in taking the time to attend day 2 of TiECon 2021 and making this a very successful event. Bye now.